Thank you so much. It's my honor to be here for this 2024 East Africa Leadership Summit, sponsored by the Minnesota Institute of Horn of Africa Studies. So thank you for this tremendous opportunity.
Many of you might think that the conflict in Tigray, what we believe is a state-sponsored genocide, has ended following the cessation of hostilities agreement that was signed in Pretoria almost a year and a half ago. However, the fact remains that people on the ground continue to suffer. The only different thing now is that the suffering is not only limited to Tigray. It has been exported to other parts of the country, and the country as a whole is in chaos at the moment. Civilians left and right are suffering at the hands of a very dictatorial and genocidal regime that continues to occupy power at the federal state. And this is not only due to the very corrupt and dictatorial nature of the federal government, but also due to the ill-informed and at times uninformed foreign policy of countries like the US and the European Union. Because these very influential powerhouses continue to embolden the federal government as it continues to slaughter people left and right. A very simple example is what happened in Tigray. There are concrete evidences that prove what happened was indeed a state-led genocide that resulted in the killing and the massacre of over 500,000 people and the conflict-related sexual violence of over 350,000 young girls and women. But despite these facts that are independently verified, the State Department and others at the US government continue to push for transitional justice. Transitional justice, in a very simple term, is like reconciliation or forgiving and moving forward. We don't believe, I personally as an international relations researcher and as a human rights defender do not believe transitional justice would lead towards stability and peace. What could lead towards a sustainable peace in Ethiopia is a real accountability and justice mechanism that the people continue to call for. And this is not really a call only coming from the people in Tigray. I believe this is a call that is echoed across the board by all Ethiopians. And there is a very legitimate reason why that's the case, why we don't think transitional justice will lead Ethiopia towards sustainable peace and stability. One, the federal government that controls all judiciary mechanisms in Ethiopia, including the Supreme Court, doesn't have the political will nor the commitment to render justice for the crimes it committed. Two, the Ethiopian judiciary system doesn't have the capacity to adjudicate crimes as grave as weaponized sexual violence and man-made famine and massacre. But the third and the most important thing is the conflict in Tigray was not a local conflict. It was a regional conflict that involved Eritrea, Somalia to a certain degree, UAE, United Arab Emirates, and many other countries. And so there has to be a justice and accountability mechanism that truly reflects the reality and has the intention and the capacity to forge a better path going forward. But what's happening today, as it has been echoed earlier when folks from the State Department was talking, is that the US government and others haven't seen enough of the evil nature of the federal government. They haven't seen enough of how little to no regard the federal government has when it comes to human rights, and they want to continue giving them chance to kill and massacre more people and marginalize even more people in the nation. So really the solution here is for global or international partners, including the US government, to have a well-informed foreign policy towards Ethiopia. Foreign policy that centers the aspirations and the political wishes of the Ethiopian people and not necessarily the few that continues to influence the foreign policy. And the third and the last thing I would say is ensuring that there is victim-centered approach to everything that we do as we continue to aspire and to hope to create a better future for Ethiopians. We have to make sure that our advocacy centers on the voices of the victims and the victims that I work with, the women that I work with who continue to suffer due to the many horrific psychological and physical damage that they incur following the conflict-related sexual violence on daily basis. They're calling for an international justice and accountability mechanism. They're calling for regime change in Ethiopia. They want those who order soldiers to go and rape them, to go and kill them, to go and force their fathers to rape their own children. They want them to be held accountable. They don't want them to continue committing crimes with impunity, what is exactly happening in Ethiopia. So just to make everything short, the solution is to have real justice and accountability mechanism that doesn't cover up things but hold actors accountable. And the actors could be from all sides. We don't have a problem. As a Tigran, I don't have a problem having Tigran authorities that might have been implicated in crimes being accountable. But I have a problem when fellow Ethiopians tell me, because you're from Tigray and someone from Tigray has committed a crime against my people, let's just forget it and walk away. No, if we want to see a better future where people don't get prosecuted because of their identity, those who did it today should be held accountable.
I would like to thank everybody to remain till the end. I will try to give you a short chronology of how Ethiopia found itself in the situation it is in now. Because that will help us understand what the country is looking like. Now, Ethiopia, as it stands as it is today, had its shape only 150 or 160 years ago. Before that, Ethiopia today has about 80 ethnic groups, out of which the 60 or 50 were incorporated into Ethiopia 150 or 160 years ago. But after the incorporation, they were never integrated into the Ethiopian proper because their languages, their culture, their identity, and everything was denied. They were not recognized. They were not given human dignity. They were not using their languages. Their cultures were neglected and all these things. So it went through like this. It went through by being marginalized in the imperial regime and in the Derg regime. But in the 1960s and 1970s, there was a huge national movement from ethnic groups, these 50 or 60 ethnic groups. There were also armed struggles that culminated in overthrowing the Derg regime in 1991. In 1991, and they drew up a kind of agreement, meaning about 17 or 18 of armed struggle, armed groups came together and they signed an agreement, a transitional charter, which later became the constitution of the country in the 1995. So in 1995, a new constitution was drawn that gave recognition to the use of the languages and the cultivation of the cultures of every ethnic group in the country. So the country was divided, or it was redrawn along ethnic lines, and they had various regions. So in these regions, for example, Somali had its own region, Oromia had, Amhara, Afar, Benishangul, and we had about 11 of them. That means all these 11 regions, they use their own languages, they educate their children in their languages, and they cultivate their culture. That was enshrined in the current constitution. But later on, the TPLF and the ruling EPRDF party became more of dictator and was not able to implement fully the spirit and the democratic values that were enshrined in the constitution. So that resulted in an uprising against the regime, and in 2018, struggle from within the party and then from outside the party became instrumental in pushing away the ruling party and bringing Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed into the premiership. What happened in 1918 was, when Prime Minister Abiy came into power, there were two conflicting views. These conflicting views are, there are some groups that thought that the old regime or the old ideology will come, in which the country was in great glory, and the country had great history, and the country had peace. Therefore, we are heading back to those old glorious days. Some people were dreaming like that. Many political parties who were outside of the country, who were in exile, thought that that regime will come back again. Therefore, by pushing aside the EPRDF or the TPLF regime, and then by the coming of the Abiy regime into power, that was their aspiration. On the other hand, the other ethnic parties were dreaming another thing. They thought that the federal system will be implemented fully, and then it is the right time now to self-governance in full, and then to use one's property in one's land, and then they were expecting the full implementation of the federal system. So these two ideologies clashed. And Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed and his colleagues, or the ruling party now, they were in the middle, meaning they know that these two ideas are too incompatible and at the same time irreconcilable ideologies. So, at first glance, the Abiy regime took the TPLF and other ethnic parties like the OLF and the ONLF, the prime targets that will challenge the authority of the Prime Minister and his colleagues. So they were targeted. The first one was TPLF. War was waged against TPLF. There was a huge propaganda campaign, both on OLF and TPLF, and then it resulted into a huge war. It resulted in huge war, like my friends said, about 1 million. You cannot believe. Many of you might not have heard this. Within 2 years, about 1 million people died in one single country. The country fought against its own people. 1 million people died, and several hundreds of thousands were evicted their places. So today, the situation in Ethiopia is so grave. Economically, the economy is on its knees. It has defaulted on its foreign debt. There are no direct foreign investments in the country today. Industries are being closed. There is a huge unemployment in the country. There is huge corruption. The cost of living is rising. Therefore, the country is in a very, very bad shape. So, politically, the same is true. But what can one do for this one? I would say only one thing. There are so many suggestions for that. But as to me, what seems feasible is going back to constitutionalism. You know, I heard on this stage from Undersecretary earlier, and I responded to that because she said, or according to her views, it was ethnic federalism didn't work. And I said ethnic federalism was not practiced. It is about self-rule. It's about human dignity. It's about accommodating diversity. It's about democracy and equality. It has never been implemented. Had it been implemented, these all problems we wouldn't have faced that. So let's go back to the constitutionality. Conduct free, fair elections, and then the West, including the United States, must help so that we head towards that. Otherwise, the idea that is going on in Ethiopia today about the national dialogue, in which the cadres or the government is talking to itself, and also about the idea of transitional government, does not work at all. It will pull us down, it will bog us down into further ditch. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It is hard to say it in 1 minute how to see the country at large. The country at large, before I speak about the country at large, I have to speak what my people or what Amharas are in need right now. As you said, in Amhara region, there is an active war. There is a series of active war. Internets are shut down. There is no transportation. There is nothing in the region, and it is under state of emergency. Though the state of emergency is declared in Amhara region, but it works all over the country. That means all Amharas all over the country are profiled under state of emergency, or the true voice, all the true voices of Amhara journalists, even the House of People representatives are arrested. So what the Amhara people need right now is they have a question of survival. They're fighting for ensuring their survival. It's an ongoing war, it's an ongoing genocide happening in our region. So the thing that we are looking, the families, the community back home, they are looking for survival. We demand and we ask the world, to stand with the people who are fighting for their survival. But the situation as a whole in the country is, it's getting worse. My fellow friends were saying that from different perspectives, especially as you mentioned, Sena mentioned, especially after the Pretoria Agreement. During the Pretoria Agreement, the Amhara people, the Amhara activists and journalists, we've been asking that the Amhara people were not represented. During that negotiation or agreement, I know everybody except the Amhara people, everybody says you are represented by the federal government, but the people, the community, the Amhara people themselves, they say we're not represented. The federal government is killing, the federal government is massacring, the federal government is displacing Amharas instead of, representing us. But during the agreement between TPLF and Prosperity Party, the negotiators, they said you are represented. The people, we said we're not represented. And it opened another era for another war. It ended up the Tigray war, and then it opened a door for the Amhara war. So Abiy Ahmed opened official war to the people of Amhara. So that's the Pretoria Agreement that we gained from the Pretoria Agreement. So we're not looking another Pretoria Agreement. We're not looking another peace negotiation which we are not truly represented. People are talking about national dialogues or negotiations right now for Amharas, whereas the true voices of Amharas are under prison. All the journalists, I'm a journalist, I'm not arrested because I'm here. All my friends, my colleagues, even my media back home is closed already. And I know that if I go back home, they will take me from the airport. That's why I'm running here and then with a tourist visa. I'm not even a citizen, or I'm not asking for asylum right now, because I came here just to visit and I stayed here. As soon as I arrived here, my media were closed there. My friend is arrested. The true representatives from the House of People representative, the Amhara representatives, they are arrested. And we're talking about the national dialogue or peace negotiations, which is a great, serious paradox. So for us, we need to have the true voices. As an Amhara, we need to have the true voices. We need peace. We need justice. Even we ask for independent investigation for the previous issues too. Not only for this ongoing war, but also for the previous issues. I have been witnessed for Amhara women. I interviewed, I listened their story, I cried with them, who were raped by TPLF soldiers, who were displaced by Prosperity Party soldiers, and OLA soldiers too. They told me their stories. And also I heard the stories of Tigray women who were raped by different groups. They said the Amhara leaders, the Amhara soldiers, the Eritrean soldiers raped them. I heard all these things. So I demand for the true independent investigation. not accusing here and there. But also I demand, in order to make the situation better in Ethiopia, as well as in Amhara, we need to stop the government, the Abiy Ahmed government, we need to stop the war on Amhara, the ongoing war. I'm not talking about the situation which is past. I'm talking about the ongoing war, the ongoing genocide which is committed by the Ethiopian government. Unless and otherwise, all things will be, a joke for Amharas. Talking about peace negotiations, talking about national dialogue, talking about agreements like Pretoria and others, it is a joke. First, we need to survive. We need the world to stand to stop the ongoing war and genocide. Denying all these things and having Amharas with negotiations and national dialogues is unthinkable. So if you ask me, how do you see the situation? This is how I see it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mazam. I'll take my papers. Okay, so I want to open up and take a question. What I do want to say is this. As you heard, each of them, from Faisal to Maaza to Professor Bakala to Maaza Mohammed, each of them represent different community. You heard what each of them talked about. We come from different background. From Ethiopia, majority of us. I want you guys to ask them hard question. If you don't, I will. I'll take maybe 2 or 3 questions, and you can ask all of them. You can name particularly. You know their names. Faisal, Garba, Tumazas. Okay, you raise your hand, so I'll take you first. The media is also recording, so okay. The question, 1.5 minutes.
Yeah, thank you for bringing them together, because if I called them, maybe or probably I wouldn't succeed because of the deep division. So my question, I do have 2 questions, one for all of them. Ethiopia is deeply divided among communities, and one cause for the current turmoil is, this division and the rhetoric from all sides against each other. So what is the way forward, and how can we come together and as Ethiopians stand together and bring the communities together to solve our own issues and to clear our house? That is one question. The second question goes to Maaza. You said Amhara is, struggling for survival. But how long can each of us, last time it was the Tigray, then or there is a war in Oromia, there is the Afar issues, Somali issues. Everybody is always saying about survival. Is that not, leading the countries even into disintegration, or even the survival of the country itself? Is that in question if this scenario continues? So what is the alternative for the peace, for the negotiation? Are there any other mechanisms? For how long the Amhara going to fight with the federal government? Then there is a blame from Tigray against Amhara. There is a blame from Oromo against Amhara, or from Amhara against Oromo. So how long we continue this way? And do you think the survival of the country itself is not in question? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. You have a question? I'll take 2 questions just for the sake of it, and I'll take third, and then I'll take a second round. But okay, where's the mic? Could you please pass the mic, young man? Walk around and give it to this guy, please. Thank you. Okay, 1 minute, please.
Thank you. It's my first time to ask a question, but let me say this. For the young lady from Amhara region, which is basically, I have a question, especially Oromos living in Wollo, in the North Shores. They are daily massacred, especially last week in a wedding. The whole people in a house, they were burned to ash. even like about 32 people. So when this kind of things happens, even from maybe you have, relations from those who are uprising against the government, killing innocent people, is not good. So I would like to say, to give you a message, if you know one of them, to tell them, please, innocent people are innocent people. Okay. If they want to fight with the government, let them fight. So that's the only thing I have for you. Just if you pass this message.
Okay, thank you so much. The third question is over there. Yes. Okay, and that will be the third, and then I'll come back. I'm sorry, I didn't know you walked. Okay, I didn't see you, but I'll try to take so. I hope you're writing down. And just keep in mind, let me just say this. These are here in diaspora. They do not represent any political party, so they do not. You ask them general question. They cannot, make any decision like, hey, OLA stop, FANO stop. They can't realistically. So just generally, but they are very prominent activists. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much. We follow the news and we follow what's going on in Ethiopia, and everybody's concerned about what's going on. And what you are telling us is true. It's the truth. But my question will be different. It will be a sequel or a follow-up of what I asked today to Ms. Molly Fee. My question is, and I'm asking this as individuals, because I am from Somalia. Abiy is trying to annex part of Somalia. So the question is, I'm asking each one of you, not as a politician, because you are not part of the government, but as individuals, how do you see Dr. Abiy's illegal attempt to annex part of Somalia, especially its maritime area or the sea? That's my question. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, let me move on, and I want them to answer. There's 3 questions that have been asked. Okay, I'll come back and then let's answer this, and then for the panelists, I'm gonna time you, and so you please keep it to 2 to 3 minutes because this is responding. So that way we can turn it into conversation. Who Faisal wanna start, please?
I think I will only touch the last question and the question of people fighting each other. I think the death and the inner fighting that you see in Ethiopia is really more than what the eye meets. I think it's a restructuring of the Ethiopian state per se. People don't just go into war, people don't just kill each other, governments don't kill its people. There is a political crisis and state formation crisis. I always argued that Ethiopia has never achieved what is called state formation. The West wrote a lot propaganda about Ethiopia. What you see today is Ethiopia struggling to either separate from each other or form a state, and that's the conundrum. And that's what Bakale was mentioning. Can the constitution rescue Ethiopia from its imperial hodgepodge, Humpty Dumpty that it was, to a cohesive state formation? And the verdict is not yet there. That's one. In terms of Abiy trying to grab or annex part of Somalia, for those of you who don't know Somali history, it's only 54 years since 1954 when Somaliland was annexed to Ethiopia by the US with the British and Emperor Haile Selassie. So people who were not under Ethiopian rule are still alive and young and kicking. That's why the Somali region, not 1% speaks Amharic. How can a person be part of a nation state if they don't even communicate? They can't even listen to the national radio or read the national paper. Can you imagine bringing an entire nation of Central America and make part of America and ask them to pay loyalty to the United States? It will never happen. Can Abiy annex part of Somalia? I think it's an expression of what the West is now waking up to learn, that Abiy may not even be sane, because being the host of the Africa unity, the headquarters of Africa oneness, and trying to cross and destroy the one principle that unites Africa, the principle of territorial integrity and sovereignty of the Africa unity. It's like America trying to kill itself by annexing Canada. That's what Abiy is doing. So in my opinion, it's only a madman's play to attempt that. Thank you.
Thank you. I will also touch on two questions. The first one, I believe a brother from Ethiopia asked here about people in Ethiopia being divided. I don't buy that concept, unfortunately, because I don't think there is a concept called Ethiopia to begin with. There is no national identity called Ethiopia. Ethiopia is the coming together of different nations and nationalities. The Tigrans, the Amharas, the Oromo, the Agao, the Kamant, and the Somali, and what have you, make Ethiopia what it is today. What's happening today is there is a government that is sitting in the helm of power alongside its original cronies that are trying to impose a one unified identity on people that are innately different. So the Tigrans are being forced to deny who they are and become Amharanized, as it has been evident when the forces from the Amhara region were raping the Tigran women. They were telling them that they were doing it in order to Amharanize them, in order to cleanse their bloodline, in order to ensure that a Tigran womb doesn't continue to reproduce. So I don't necessarily think Ethiopia is not a one unified country. Ethiopia is the coming together of people. There has been a multinational federalistic order that helped people coexist peacefully with some shortcomings. But now what's happening is even that constitutional order has been disrupted and they can't live together anymore. So I think it's important that we start our assumptions correctly. So the assumption that there is one unified identity called Ethiopian is absolutely wrong, and it's not true, because I am not an Ethiopian. I am a Tigran who happened to was born and lived in Ethiopia, and by the constitution I became an Ethiopian. The same thing can be said about everyone else. The second issue is okay, so if people are fighting against each other, then what's the solution? There is a blame coming from the Amhara against the Tigray. There is a blame coming from the Tigrans against the Amhara, blame from the Oromo against Amhara, and vice versa. Okay, if we all agree that the federal government is violating our rights, why was it so difficult during the active conflict, during the genocide in Tigray, for people to come together and call for a transitional government or hold the Ethiopian government accountable? When myself and His Excellency and others were actively working towards putting an end to the conflict in Tigray and calling for an international credible justice and accountability mechanism, many, including those who are sharing this stage, have been working purposefully in order to deny that chance. So I think it's really, we have to have these hard conversations and we have to be honest if we are to find a solution. The solution is there has been a power structure in Ethiopia that is now transitioning, that is not being changed, but still there is a unitarist camp that is forcing people to deny their identity, and there is land grabbing. There is this burning desire to claim something that does not belong to you. So the solution is to respect people for who they are and to let them coexist. If that doesn't happen, people should have the right to go about their own way. The Ethiopian Constitution, under Article 39, allows for people to exercise their right self-determination up to cessation. So if anyone doesn't feel safe in Ethiopia, in that agreement, then they should be able to have their own independent country, because I, as a Tigran, cannot really foresee a future where I refer to myself an Ethiopian, because Ethiopia has killed my father, killed my mom, continued to suffocate my people. So I think that's the reality.
Okay, thank you. Professor.
Okay, I think the main problem in Ethiopia is it emanates from the attempt to destroy.
But you heard the question. They asked 3 questions. I want us to kind of answer their question and then keep the time.
To destroy the federal system. Like they said, both of them said, Ethiopia does not have one identity. We Ethiopians, we have very little things to share except the country, and that state formation, because it didn't integrate all its people, were not considered themselves as one people, in fact. And this attempt has been done in the last 30 or something years by bringing them together to form a state. There was a federal arrangement in which every region uses its own language, cultivates its culture, and that was a very good beginning. But now the attempt to destroy that and to take away the hard-won rights of the people, and then to squeeze everything and then put it in one melting pot has brought all these problems, because like I mentioned earlier, the current prime minister tried to destroy anything that is associated with the identity of various ethnic groups and denial of diversity. Therefore, I think as far as this continues, the country will, the fate of the country will not, we do not know what it leads to in the future. So as one country, like my friend said, what can we do? And then I will go back to my original recommendation, whether some people may accept or may not accept. I will say, well, let's go back to constitutionalism. Let's present our idea, the federal group, and then the whatever group there may be. Let's hold our own ideology, and then appear in front of the electorate, and then let's get elected through that, and then try to form one government. That is how we, what I see at the moment. Otherwise, what the government is doing, or through armed struggle or other things, the one we are trying will not take us anywhere, and the country will not head towards unity, I suppose.
Okay. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
So 2 questions. The first one, the person who raised it around here.
Yeah, the way forward. If I can repeat the question for you, is the way forward, and what alternative, to the current issue, the conflict in Amhara, and then obviously.
Before the way forward, he asked until when Amharas are fighting for survival, because he said first he mentioned all people or all others, they say the question is about survival, the war is about survival, and something like this. And I don't know why the person makes that question when it comes to Amhara issue. First my question is for you. Amhara saying we have the question of survival. They are trying to fight peacefully. They were demonstrating, they were asking in different ways, in peaceful ways, and after a long period of participating in peaceful activities, they are tired of all these things and they stand up for their rights. So this time, there is no any single Amhara who cares about the survival of the whole country. Amharas are well known for it as a unionist, and who are caring about Ethiopia, who are caring about the survival of all people as an Ethiopian. But this time, almost all Amharas, they believe they have first to survive in order to think or in order to share Ethiopia with others. First, they have to survive. So the question is, surviving from the genocide, surviving from the killing, the massacres which is committed by the government. And I don't believe there is a war between people. I don't have a situation, I don't have, a problem with that one. My problem is with the political groups. The war between the federal government and the Tigray, I believe it was a political war. It is not a war between Amharas and Tigrays. That's what I believe. But the situation leads the people to die. As my friend said, we lost millions of people within 2 years' war. It was a political war. So we need a political agreement. We need a political solution. But in order to have that, you know what, we have to acknowledge, or we have to recognize what's happening in each of us. We should not say always, it's always us. The situation happening in Tigray, now it's happening in Amhara. Yeah. The situation happening in Amhara is happening in Oromia and so many other places. Yeah. Unless and otherwise, we will die together. And this time, I can assure you, there's no any Amhara who is concerned more about Ethiopia rather than the survival of itself. First, we have to survive. First, as a people, we have to survive. Then we will talk about living with others. And about the situation that my friend mentioned, I don't know where. I know the story. As a journalist, I tried to, I know the story, what you said about the burning is in the wedding like this. I tried to get the stories from both sides. So I think it's better to see what the story from both sides, but I don't know who is making it and who did that one, so I cannot send this message. But I can assure you, the people of Amhara were fighting for the true survival. They didn't commit any kind of crimes against other people or other nations and nationalities who were living in Amhara regional state. Okay. That's what I say.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we have, I know a lot of you guys are raising hand. Okay, I know, okay. So here's what's gonna be. Abdi, how long do we have? Do we have like 10 more minutes? Because if we have, I don't think we have a lot of time to open up question. 2 minutes, okay, so I'm not gonna take a question, so I'm gonna ask you guys a last question, and that will also be your last closing remarks. Each of you guys have spoken about variety of issue. Whether it is Amhara region or Tigray region or Oromo, everybody is crying and feels like they are exceptionalism. There is exceptionally. So we realize that, we hear that, and a lot of time we ask Americans or the West or the EU to do. You have not recommended tangible the way forward. Is there a common ground? Even if there is dissolution of Ethiopia, peace of the solution would be impossible. What do you recommend? And that would be your last remark. And take 2 minutes, and that's it.
Thank you very much. I think this is not going to be a textbook recommendation, but I think we should be as organic as possible by looking at Ethiopia's current issues and problems. I think if the West is of any help, it should make sure that it fully funds the implementation of the Pretoria Agreement. That's number one. When I say fully implement, both in terms of rehabilitation, reintegration of the soldiers, and also investing in repatriating all the refugees. That's number one. Number two, I will recommend that either make the Pretoria Agreement expansive and elastic, expand, in order to include the Amhara and Oromia war, or establish a parallel, equal, or similar system of that of Pretoria to bring peace into the Amhara and Oromia conflict. That's number two. Number three, I would recommend to establish not to follow the current Abiy engineered dialogue, which is packing the process with his own cadre, but establish a South Africa-style transitional justice. Transitional justice doesn't mean you leave and let the criminal elements go free, but it really accounts for what happened and who did what, but not become punitive to the extent possible. So instead of the lukewarm transitional system that the US government is now recommending, I would go for a South Africa style reconciliation and rehabilitation and transitional justice, which is expansive. And fourthly, I will have the West to use all its powers, economic, political, what have you, to tame, not get rid of, because you cannot get rid of an existing government, but tame the government of Ethiopia that exists currently in a situation that it becomes promoter of regional stability, as opposed of what Prime Minister Abiy became now, which is the #1 instigator of instability in the region by having conflict with Djibouti, by having conflict with Somalia through the MOU, and even by not having comfortable relationship with Kenya, which is now inherited what Ethiopia used to have, which is the anchor starter in the eyes of the West. So I think taming Prime Minister Abiy and bringing him along is also a huge assignment that both Ethiopians as well as the West would have. Thank you very much.
Thank you. My recommendations, I do agree with my fellow panelists and with regards to the full implementation of the Pretoria Agreement, which among many things dictates the full withdrawal of all foreign forces from Tigray, which includes the Amhara forces and the Eritreans that continue to occupy over 40% of lands that are historically and constitutionally of the Tigray region. And in addition to that, there needs to be full rehabilitation and repatriation of IDPs, who are about 2.5 million of them living in extremely horrific circumstances across the region. And of course, there are over 70,000 refugees that continue to find themselves in another round of conflict in Sudan. So there needs to be full implementation of Pretoria. But the most important thing for Ethiopians, for anyone who cares about Ethiopia, is to have honest and real conversation. Today we heard about different communities being marginalized and being at the receiving end of state violence. But it's really important to remember who these actors are and what role they play during the conflict that initially began in Tigray. The Amhara forces, particularly Fano, have been working hand in hand with the federal government during the conflict in Tigray. The breakup between the Amhara forces and the Ethiopian federal government came when the Pretoria Agreement was signed, that effectively silenced the guns in Tigray. So the political contention still remains, and actors are changing, goals, as it is the case in politics all the time. So the Pretoria Agreement is not a peace treaty; it's a cessation of hostilities agreement, and there was supposed to be peace talks and political conversation after the Pretoria Agreement. But what we're seeing today is the international actors, including the US, treating the cessation of hostilities agreement as a peace treaty. It is not a peace treaty. It does not address and answer the main reasons why conflicts continue to erupt across the country. So we have to push towards having that real and legitimate conversation, but with the understanding that even us have played a role in the suffering and the massacre of innocent people, farmers everywhere in the country. That being said, us as individuals on this stage, we have to understand the power we have and the role and the influence we have in our community. Some of us have been working, advocating on behalf of the victims of conflict-related sexual violence, man-made famine, starvation, and what have you, while many others have been actively dehumanizing people, actively denying the crimes that are effectively documented. So I think it's all good to act holy and all, but we have to hold ourselves accountable if we are to have the moral ground to hold politicians and others accountable. And just last point, I know we talked a lot about the US. But the main reason why we talk a lot about the US is because US is a superpower, and they have a role to play, and they have economic, political, and diplomatic tool that they can use to ensure dictatorial government do not continue to marginalize people, as it is the case in Ethiopia.
Okay, thank you. You can give it right here.
All right.
You turn it off.
I buy completely what they said about the Pretoria implementation of the Pretoria Agreement, but for me that is a little bit narrower, because the Pretoria Agreement is concerned with the war between Tigray and the federal government, the central government. But if we are talking about the entire Ethiopia as its entirety, we need to expand a little bit and talk about the Pretoria Agreement calls for the restoration of constitutional order, back maintenance of the status quo ante. So I think so. Let's get rid of the idea or the false impression that the Prime Minister sent to the Amharas, for example, by saying that it would take them to the old glory and then to that imperial system. Let's get rid of that tie and then come back to our senses and come to the constitutional order in which the rights of all people is respected and diversity is accommodated. Then having our ideologies running for election and having a government elected and legal and legitimate government in the future. Otherwise, I don't see any other future other than this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thank you. My recommendations, I believe in conversations, in national dialogues and different things, but it should be honest and with true representation. It should be honest and with true representation. Without having the true representations, without having the true voice of the victims, it seems like, having another or opening another situations for different, different wars and conflicts. So in order to stop the situations and to make the situations better in Ethiopia, we need to have a discussion with a true representation and with honest representation. And the other thing, as an Amhara and as an activist and advocate for Amhara people, I'm really tired of hearing that the situations happening during the war in Tigray, that the Amharas committed this and that, the Fanos committed this and that. Then now when we are asking about the current situations, the current pain, the current genocide and the current massacre, asking about or raising about that situation doesn't make the current one correct. I am asking an independent investigation for all what happened previously and right now. It is good and it's perfect to ask for independent investigation, accountability, and justice. But it is not right and it is not correct, it is not fair to say you do this previously and then this one is correct. That doesn't work. By the way, it may be working for the same in social medias or in other situations. But you cannot fall or you cannot answer this issue for people who have the full control right now on their rights. For the people, for the Fanos or for the Amhara youths who are saying we will die for our survival. You cannot fool them with these answers, or you cannot stop them with answers. You can stop all the situations. You can make better the situations with truly addressing the situation. Unless there will not be any kind of situation that you can make it on the social media. Shouting on social media, blaming, shaming, or trying to underestimate people, it works on social media. But on the ground, people are dying for their survival. So you cannot stop it in this way. That's what I'm saying. Thank you.
Okay, before I let them off the stage, I'll say this. I'll ask each of you, as well as the panelists, just for a moment, whatever ethnic group you are, step out of that and pretend like you are, if you're an Oromo, pretend like you're an Amhara, or if you are Somali, pretend like you are Far, or whatever ethnic it is. What would I do? How would I feel if what's going on now, or what's happened 2 years ago, what happened 2 decades ago happened to me? I want to ask, it's about time. Ethiopia, the Horn, is in crisis. A crisis that requires no one can save us other than us. For us to save ourselves, that we have to see the humanity of the other person. These panelists who came here are very vocal and respecting their community. Some of them took high risk to be here to sit next to the fellow person they sat next to. I want to appreciate them on behalf of the Institute, and I want to appreciate them on behalf of the UWH, and on behalf of you guys. Thank you so much for being here.